Hey guys, making this video in response to Stefan Molyneux's latest video called Assertiveness. And like usual, Stefan starts in with a caller. When a caller calls in, he'll start in very aggressively, and I often like, what are you doing, Stefan? But he usually comes around and brings out good points. And anyone who watches me regularly knows that I'm a huge Molyneux fan. I mean, he's my favorite YouTuber by far. I really enjoy watching him. But I wanted to make a response video because this is kind of important to me. It's my area. The caller called in and said he was a young man in his 20s, that he has a real estate venture in South America, and it's crunch time, and he does not want to be, he feels like he needs to do more, but he does not want to be one of these salesmen, that guy, he termed it, that's pushy and arrogant and that people don't like. Well, Stefan started in strong and trying to establish, why does he think that pushy is bad? And he goes through the history of why he thinks pushy is bad. And there's a few things Stefan left out. In the end, he rounded it off pretty well, and I agreed with him for the most part. But I wanted to say something from my experience. I've been in sales, so I can talk about this a lot. And so building material sales mostly, and that type of stuff. But yard or outdoor living kind of stuff, and that kind, and different things. But I'm going to tell a short story about my father. When I was very young, probably 10, 11 years old, I remember my dad used to get phone calls from people trying to sell him tools. My dad owned a sawmill, and they were very pushy, and he was on the phone with him. He'd try to get off the phone, and he'd tell him he's not interested, and they just keep on and on bugging him and calling back. And one night, he hung up on a guy. And my mom felt so bad that he hung up on the guy that the guy called right back. She answered the phone, and the guy told her how rude my father was for hanging up on him, and that he was just trying to sell him something, and that it's very rude and disrespectful for my dad to hang up on him after my dad had told him he wasn't interested. I believe that's what this guy was talking about when he was talking about being pushy. That is pushy beyond extreme. I mean, that's ridiculous. But of course, in reality, that's not that common. But the reason that people don't like pushy salesmen, and Stefan pointed on this, is they don't want to say no. It's a confrontational to them. They don't want to have to argue with the person, especially after they said no once and they come back. They feel it's a confrontation. They don't want it, and so they close the door. They want nothing to do with it, and they start ostracizing salesmen. And I have another example. Just last October, I quit working for an outdoor living company I was doing sales for 2 or 3 years, and it was the same way there. The owner, the manager, and our financial office manager, whenever a salesman walked through that front door, they would run out the back, and they would leave me. And it wasn't just me, there was a lot of salesmen there, but I would always be nice to the salesman because I knew what it was like. You don't have to be rude. You don't have to buy anything from them, but you can treat them with respect. And these guys would just book it and hardly refuse to talk to them. And if they did catch them and talk to them, because I would sometimes go get them and ask them to come out, they often refused, but sometimes they would. And this was a decent-sized company. It was a small business, but it wasn't just a little two-man show or anything. There was like 7, 8 salesmen. They would, if the guy was pushy in any way, shape, or form, they would write him off immediately, and he didn't have a chance to sell them anything. So that's one reason it's important not to be pushy, whether that term is justified or not. The American public sees pushy salesmen as undesirable. They want nothing to do with them. Even if being pushy isn't bad, that if it even has negative connotations because of people's weakness. Stefan argued the point that I'm not going to change my behavior to accommodate weak people. That's giving in. But if you really want to sell, you have to take this into consideration, that there are people out there who are very sensitive to salesmen, a lot of people, and if you in any way appear pushy, they will just shut you down. So I believe that we're in a new era where the old style used car salesman type people, it doesn't work anymore. David Sandler, he's a great salesman that has CDs. I've listened to him a lot. And he talks about this some. He doesn't believe in being too pushy, but he believes in closing deals. And I don't like being confrontational for the most part, and this guy probably didn't either. So for me and him, what Stefan said is very good. We need to quit worrying too much about offending people. We need to be more pushy. For someone who naturally is pushy, they need to listen to me. So there's a balance. We can't be too concerned about it or we won't be successful, but we have to be very aware that a pushy salesman has bad connotations. There are a huge chunk of America that will shut them down. It will hurt you in the long run when you're selling much more than not being pushy. Even though that will hurt you too. You might make some less sales, but if you're too pushy, it's done. And another example, I have a friend I grew up with, and he never calls me unless he has some multi-level marketing scheme he wants to sell me. And I get so annoyed. I don't want to talk to him. I have a lot of people push multi-level marketing schemes onto me, and I get very annoyed with someone being pushy. Now, I'm not against multi-level marketing. There's a lot of successful people in it. The percentage is low. It is not a scam like some people say. It's not a Ponzi scheme. You have to be very dedicated. I actually am part of one now, a travel one that's a very good deal, and I have nothing against it. I just don't want to be pushed all the time. You know, I guess it's time and place. And the caller made that point. But he never brought up, the caller never brought up how there's so much, a large part of society. He just doesn't want to be negative. That he does want to sell, but he doesn't want to have negative connotations. He doesn't want to have it harm him to be pushy. And obviously, I say this with great respect, that Stefan has had a bad experience with being called pushy. That people have challenged him on this, and he feels justified to fight back, and that's fine. By the point that I said earlier, that Stefan said, I'm not going to change my behavior because of the weak negative view that isn't even true. Because what he said is right, that the main reason people hate pushy salesmen is because they don't feel comfortable saying no. They aren't secure. They can't just say no and walk away. So they want to isolate that person and ostracize them. But the real, like I said, being a salesman is a fine line between being assertive and still being aware that this is reality in our society today. That if you push too much, you will become ostracized. It will hurt your sales in the long run. And just because, I mean, it's good to educate people, but just because we feel like we can't give in to other people's weaknesses doesn't mean that we can't fight back, or that we can't change our tactics. And I think that, like I said before, the old school used car salesman approach to sales is a little outdated. We need to be assertive, but we need to build our sales skills on relationship and making people feel comfortable, and then staying with them. We don't have to push. We can stay with them and keep building that relationship and keep asking them questions. As long as they are talking, we still have a chance to sell. When you're just doing all the talking, then your chances are becoming less and less by the minute. But I appreciate Stefan Molyneux. You guys know that I'm a huge fan. I just felt compelled to make this response video because I felt there was things that he left out, that he didn't touch on. And and this is a little bit of criticism, he allowed his negative view of people who criticize pushy people to affect the real reality that pushy salesmen can damage their sales if they become too pushy, because people are weak and they don't want confrontation. But hey, great. I hope Stefan Molyneux sees this. He probably won't. But Stefan, you are a true philosopher, and anyone who argues against that point is an idiot. So I really like you. I really like watching your videos, and I hope you guys enjoy watching this. Hit like if you like it, and subscribe. Peace. And become a great salesman, because that is the highest paid job in the world if you're good. And there is a long journey getting there. Peace.